hope you guys enjoyed lunch. Hope you guys enjoyed the Andean music. The Peruvian embassy was kind enough to sponsor that, so we're really thankful for them for being part of this event. So hope you guys have been enjoying so far the summit. On this side, on the organizing side, has been a blast. It's been great to get to meet you all, to get you all here enjoying and connecting. That's what we want to do. That's what we wanted out of this summit, to build bridges between the UK and the rest of the countries in Latin America. So, without further ado, let's continue. And it's my pleasure to have here with us Carlos Garcia Tati, who he is an alumnus from the Said MBA, class of 2011. He's the only alumnus, part of the alumni. He's one of the only one to have founded a unicorn status company. He also founded the first unicorn in Mexico's history, and this is Kavak. But not only that, he's an impressive human being. We were just having a quick chat over beers 30 minutes ago, and I scrapped all the questions that I had for this talk because I think he has a lot more to teach us than what I originally planned for. So without further ado, please welcome Carlos Garcia on stage.
Well, thank you for being here, Carlos. It's an honor to have you here. When we started planning for the summit, we were like, okay, what's our North Star? And one of those were to have you here. So it's quite an honor to have you on stage with us. So you were here 14, 15 years ago. And then, since then, your life has changed so much. I was wondering if you could guide us a little bit for the people that are not in context of what Kavak is and what your life has been, to give us a little bit of context on that and what your company has been ever since inception till these days.
Well, first, thanks so much for everybody here. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. That's quite a question, you know. We can spend hours going through that. Let me start by myself and about me a little bit and why we built Kavak, and then we can take it from there if you want. I'm from Venezuela originally. I'm 41 years old. I've been building businesses most of my life. Had a very different upbringing than normal people. I went to 14 different schools before going to college. My dad was in the military, and he was an admiral in the Navy in Venezuela back in the 2000s, and he was one of the guys that led the movement against Chavez when I was a teenager, and that ended up not going well. He ended up going to prison, having to leave the country, and I stayed there for quite a while, built a couple of businesses while I was there, made some money, invest that money back into real estate, lost it all. That led me to move to Italy without a dime, and I spent a year broke in Italy, and then I don't know how, but I got accepted into Oxford, and I still don't know.
We'll have similar doubts.
Yeah, my GMAT was like, I don't really know how. Something happened. There was a glitch. There was another Carlos Garcia that they accepted, and I ended up here, and that changed the course of my trajectory up to that point, and it led to me working at Amazon very early on in 2010, and getting to see the impact of what a marketplace can do and how fast it could scale, and that put an obsession on my mind that we needed to have an Amazon in Latin America. And I returned to Latin America to work for McKinsey for a while. It's the only decision that I made in my life related to money, and the last one. But it was an important decision because I needed to pay the MBA. I was there for a couple of years, and then left McKinsey to start Amazon for Latin America, a company called Lino. I started the marketplace side of the business, and that was it was an interesting story and trajectory because I was a kid. I was like 28 years old. I was the oldest one. We were trying to build a business in LATAM, and we learned firsthand that if you're going to build a business in Latin America, you need to get ready to build like 10 different businesses to make business work. If you're an entrepreneur in the US or Europe, you're usually building the last mile of a product that is 10 times better than whatever exists. When you go out and you return to emerging markets, the basic things don't work. So if you wanted to build an e-commerce, there was no way that you can pay something online. So you had to build a payment solution, sort of like the Stripe of it. If you wanted to deliver a product to somebody's home, there was no FedEx or DHL. We had to buy the trucks, put the software, and then go to deliver products to people's homes that didn't have a doorman. So 90% of people couldn't receive products in their houses, so you had to build like locker systems and places to make that happen. And even then, you know, people didn't trust e-commerce, so 50% of it was cash on delivery, so you needed to figure out a way to like charge in cash. 50% of the time, people just spend the money when the product already was there. And when you got the money, it was how to get that money back into the banking system. So we spent several years just building the underlying infrastructure to be able to do e-commerce. And we weren't, you know, we were 28. I was 28, like my CMO was 25. So we didn't know much about anything, but we learned the hard way that if you want to build a business in LATAM, you have to build several things to make it work. And throughout that process, I had a car, living in Colombia, that I needed to sell. I was an entrepreneur, I needed funding, and I got defrauded trying to sell that car in Colombia. Basically lost that car, landed into Mexico, being, you know, from Venezuela, an entrepreneur. I was like a third-class citizen in Mexico. No bank wanted to lend me to buy a new car, so I ended up going to a classified tat to buy a used car. Spent like 6 months figuring out which car to buy. Traveled to Guadalajara, a city a few hours away from Mexico City, bought the car. And after a few months, I got stopped by the police because the car that I bought, all the documents were forged.
Classic.
And yeah, that, you know, I was, at that point in time, I'm thinking, you know, I'm either the stupidest person alive, that this happens to me twice, which I think I am, but I didn't want to accept that, and I just started to research, you know, what's happening in the industry, and that sort of like led to Kavak.
Okay, very interesting. Well, talking to you before coming here, there was something very interesting that you mentioned, that before starting Kavak, you knew nothing about cars. Before somewhat being in Linio, your only experience was an internship at Amazon. There seems to be quite an interesting silver lining between a bunch of entrepreneurs. Most famously, David Velez from Nubank. He had never been a banker, and he opened a bank. So what's your advice on how entrepreneurs should approach a dream or something where they don't have experience in? And what's the value of not being in the industry? Because it seems like it's your drive for purpose and solving an issue was way bigger than actually having experience. And being in the MBA and being in the classes, a lot of what it's taught is like, okay, you first have to get experience in the field in order to have an impact or in order to get a career on. And it seems like these entrepreneurs are not having that experience, and you guys are turning out great. So what's your take on that? Because you obviously just woken up and ventured and doing it, trying to solve it without previous knowledge of it. Yeah,
that's a good question. So I think experience, it's useful, but when you're starting to solve a problem or an issue, it's not about an industry. It's not about a particular thing. It's about something that you lived and something that you want to make sure that if somebody else goes through it, it's better, right? And for me, it wasn't, I was not trying to solve buying and selling cars. I was not trying to solve, I was literally trying to solve a fraud problem that I saw in the market, that 40% of people that were going into the market and trying to buy or sell a car, they were getting defrauded. And 40% is a lot of people. And this is not buying a car that's in bad conditions. This is being killed, you know, going into jail, being defrauded, losing all your money. And when you're buying a car, for the typical Latin America, that's the most important purchase that you're going to do in your life. So if that goes wrong, your life can change forever. So for me, it was about, I need to solve this issue of fraud. And then the second issue that I needed to solve was, okay, most people don't even have access to a car in LATAM. Out of 10 people in the US, 8 have a car. Out of 10 people in Latin America, 2 have a car. And that number became an obsessive number for me, because my job was, how do I get those 10 out of 2 to be 7 out of 10? And that was by introducing financing, creating accessibility. And I had bought my first car in my early 20s. Before that, I used public transportation. And when you use public transportation in Latin America, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But when you get a car, your life changes. And it's the most dramatic change that you're ever going to see. So I wanted to make sure that I could try to figure out how to create more of that for more people. How do I move that metric? So I never got into the car business. I got into how do I take fraud away from such an important transaction? How do I introduce accessibility and financing? And then car was just the means to that end. So I think great entrepreneurs, they're not looking at the headlines and seeing what's tracking, what's not tracking. They're literally trying to solve a real issue that a lot of people are going through and just trying to make it a lot better, right? And you don't have to be an expert to do that. You just need to be a human being that is living and that is going through that and that has empathy to understand like how customers go through that process. And ideally, through the process, you need to continue to, if you're successful, you need to continue to have the humility to not stray away from what your users are going through and continue to like knock on the problem. And the problem is that user every day. And that user every day, you have to be evaluated by your last transaction, your last interaction. And that's what's going to keep you building. And that's what's going to keep you being an entrepreneur. You know, I think that makes the best entrepreneurs, right? Like experience, of course, through it, you get better at it. You get to understand about cars and learn something about them. I am fortunately, you know, there's just so many cars, so I just use data, and data makes decisions for us. And we just make sure that where we're not experts, we put a robot in the middle that is better than 10 humans combined in a meeting room trying to figure it out.
Okay, now that you go into your entrepreneurial journey and how you wake up every day and trying to solve for these issues, me being an entrepreneur myself, I understand that getting into a right product that people are going to use requires a lot of iterations. Right now, Kavak is in a system where it has its own warehouses. You go through the car, you check them, you fix whatever it needs to be fixed. You pay the previous owner of the car within 24 hours, something like that, and then you sell the car within 20 days, right? But I guess I would love you to talk about how was the process of creating that system and what was the iteration process like from the beginning to where it is today to work, and where were the growing pains of Kavak?
Yeah, so just to bring you into context, right? When I started the business in 2016, I'm coming from Linio, coming from building this other company where I spend most of my time building the underneath of the company. So this time around, I was a little bit smarter in terms of not thinking about the business that I wanted to build, but thinking about the fundamental things below the business that I need to build. And I went on to the market saying, hey, I want to build a business where the first hand, I want to create true liquidity. Anybody that wants to sell their car, I want to be able to buy that car and get them the money that they need to do whatever they need to do. Then I need to get that car and sell it fairly quickly towards whatever means, e-commerce or through third parties to make sure that, you know, that car turns around. I'm going to finance everybody. I'm going to finance 50% more than banks finance. And if the car fails, I'm going to be there to fix it when it does and to solve that problem for a customer. When I said that out loud, and when you think about the dimensions of that, you know, used cars is 7 times bigger than new cars. So if I was going to be successful, we could be 7 times bigger than all new cars combined. We needed to price 60,000 unique SKUs and have working capital capabilities to buy all of these SKUs. And then we needed to figure out a way to logistically go inspect these cars, bring them into our warehouses, and then figure out a way to sell them online, which, you know, back in the day was difficult to think about. And finance people that nobody else was financing, while knowing cars are like humans. Cars are going to fail. Like, that's the only thing that we know for a fact. While every time a car failed, I had to be there to back it up and build the infrastructure necessary to do that and move a lot of cars, right? And when I said that out loud back then, everybody told me, you know, this kid's crazy, right? Like, he's not going to be able to do this. And for me, you know, I think it was if I was going to solve that issue of taking fraud away, introducing financing and doing it at scale means not doing it in your neighborhood, right? Millions of transactions. I needed to put a lot of time into building that infrastructure and to building sort of like those capabilities. And the only tool that I had at that point in time was data, right? And it was, how can I, with data, solve pricing? How can I, with data, solve reconditioning and warranties? How can I, with data, solve fraud, underwriting? And we invested in machine learning and AI very early on in our business. How can I, with data, lead the customer conversation. Today so to give you a little bit of context, 85% of anybody that's talking to Kavak, either chat or conversation, they're talking to a robot. We're probably one of the most advanced or the most advanced AI company when it comes to customer interaction of the world, because we were dealing with that issue every day, and we tackle it from there. So we first built the logic of our business, underlying on the data being the common ground, and then we went and we shipped at it and built the different businesses to make our business work.
Interesting. I think there's two ways that I would like to take this conversation, but I think we're gonna go more into the topic of the summit, which is Latin America and building bridges and building resilience. You talk about financing people that are typically not financed, right? And also you shared with us that your main job in Kavak has not been selling Kavak, but selling the region and getting investors to trust that the region has potential. You are probably by far the most successful racer in the history of at least in Mexico. Your company raised at one point was valued at 8.8 billion. So can you talk a lot more about what are the selling points that you do for Latin America in order to get that fundraising? And what do you talk about on investors, and what are their concerns about the region?
I think, to be more tactical about, or more strategic about that answer, I think that the first thing is, how do you get people interested, right? And for me, I was just talking with somebody, just prior to this talk, is the first thing is not even think about Latin America, nor think about the macro piece of what you're doing. The first thing is you need to get there and solve a problem. Nobody's gonna support you at the beginning. Absolutely nobody. Your family, your friends, nobody. Everybody's gonna think that you're crazy. Everybody's gonna see all the negatives of whatever you're doing. So the first thing that you need is, create that validation with your user. It's just one user at a time. Make sure that you can drive impact and that you can add value. When you do that thousands of times, interest starts to happen. Your family starts to get interested. Your friends starts to get interested. Investors start to pop up and start to talk to you. So for me, I think the first 4 years, it was mostly a bootstrap business, where I was just creating that validation and becoming attractive. And I believe in that concept, right? I don't believe that you should go out and chase. I believe that you need to attract in everything in life. If you're not attractive, if you don't have that energy, it's done, right? And you have to make sure that you have something that people get attracted to. And if people are not coming to you, it means you're not working hard enough. It means you're not working smart enough, and you're not creating that impact. So that was the first thing that for me was really important. I had to have a business that people wanted to talk about. Then when you have that business and people start coming to you, the biggest question was, what's Mexico? Mm-hmm. Right? Are you a drug dealer? Literally. Yes. And I'm I'm worse. I'm Venezuelan, man. But a lot of that was explaining, why Mexico, why LATAM was interesting, right? And it was explained about, hey, you have to explain the infrastructure problems that Mexico has and that Latin America has. Why, if I am able to solve those problems, I have an opportunity to build something huge, uncompeted, and you have to be very, very thoughtful around explaining the differences between what you're solving versus what people in the US are solving. People in the US are solving for convenience, for e-commerce. In Latin America, you're solving for fraud, for financing penetration. And by the way, you need to make it convenient. So you need to explain the problem that you're solving. And if you do a good job at that, smart people are going to see, okay, if these guys win, this is even bigger and deeper than anything else. And that's one thing. And you start with your business. Then you also have to explain LATAM, right? LATAM, in my mind, is the best place of the world to build, because we're in this environment of today. We're not in war zones. Our GDP is as big as India. People, GDP per capita is twice. So there is more opportunities, for you to put a product out there and people be able to afford it. Most of the commodities, are coming out of Brazil, Peru, Bolivia. You have nearshoring coming out of Mexico. So Latin America has a huge opportunity, to drive a lot of value, and it's not as exposed to the uncertainties that we live in the world today than the rest of the markets. And you have to make sure that you explain that properly. But you also have to remember, nobody cares. Like, it's US first, right? It's whatever, like, it's, nobody's gonna care. Like, every single dime that's gonna come to you is a dime that's not going into Netflix. It's a dime that's not going into Amazon, that's not going into Tesla, that's not going into these compounders. So you have to just be very, very, very thorough at how you tell the story, how you explain the impact behind this. And unfortunately, in LATAM, you have to bring international investors because people of the region, they still, like, we were talking about this, right, in Mexico. Like, people cannot, like, every businessman, as soon as the money hits into their account, what they're counting is, how long does it take me to get it into the US? Like, people in LATAM don't invest in LATAM, which is the biggest issue that we have. So you have to, you just have to be very thorough at it, and you have to hit your targets, right? And that's been the challenge for me, you know, like, why Kavak became so valuable so fast, why we got so much capital, it wasn't because I could tell a story. I definitely could tell a story, but it was because I was hitting my marks. And I was hitting what I was saying for the first few years until not, and then again, you know, it's a process. So you need to be able to deliver, and the moment that you don't deliver, you're gonna feel it. More so than an entrepreneur from other places of the world, because here, capital is an optionality that people have. They don't have a mandate to invest in their region. So it's a combination of both things, you know, telling a good story and hitting your marks.
We haven't talked about it, so I don't know if we want to venture into this, but I'm very curious. There's a class that a couple of us were taking that was reputation in leadership. And it was about that you don't own your own reputation. The reputation is owned by everyone's perception about you. Kavak certainly went through a phase where it had a reputational, that it was talked about, okay, the customer service is not great. So how did you navigate that? Because now you're, again, racing new rounds and everything. So definitely you navigated that wave well, and you came out of it. So how was that experience as a CEO and as a founder of a company, be seeing like the public perception or the media might not be on your side?
Listen, you know, the first thing is you have to have a long-term view, right? Like, I have a clear vision where I see Kavak in the next 10, 20 years, and I'm not deviating from that vision. That's my boss. And I'm gonna do whatever it takes to build that. And if I'm able to build that, it's gonna be amazing for everybody that, you know, gets exposed to it, my customers, my investors, my family. So the first thing is being locked in that vision and understanding that the road from that to where you are is gonna get bumpy, right? Like, you don't build a business the size of my business and you do it without complexity. Complexity is gonna hit you. Complexity is a signal of success. Media attention is a signal that people are talking about you. Like, you have to understand that the road is gonna come with noise, good and bad. And when the noise is too good, don't believe it. When the noise is too bad, don't believe it either. You have to live sort of like in the middle of it. And for us, I would say Kavak has gone through 3 phases. The first one was the first 4 years, very founder-led. I was doing everything, dealing with the customer, building the product. And I wasn't building a company, right? I was building a product and a service, and I was in the middle of it. A couple of 100 people, and, you know, we were killing it. But we were killing it in a neighborhood. You know, 90 NPS, everything was working. Everybody was telling us, wow, this is amazing. And at that, I got ambitious and naive again. And I said, you know what? I want to do this globally. Like, what would it take for me to do this not only in my neighborhood, but do it in all of Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, the Middle East, Turkey, and beyond? And because I saw that the problem that I was solving wasn't only related to a certain neighborhood. And if I wanted to create impact, I had to make a decision. Do I want to wake up every morning and, you know, make sure that the people in Santa Fe and Polanco are happy, or do I want to wake up every morning and make sure that a bunch of people, I can change their lives, right? That's a different business. That's a different mentality, right? And for the next 4 years, we went on a spree of, okay, now those capabilities that we talked about, we need to build them to solve a global issue. And that shifted sort of like our energy from building that great product for that end user to building the main verticals to solve that on a global basis. And that has its good and its bad. The good thing is, if you build these verticals, you can then go and strive for that mission that you go ahead. The bad thing is, while you're building these verticals, I'm not thinking about whether my customer that's buying their car, selling their car, is having an amazing experience. I'm just, and mistakenly, I'm just thinking, where is he going to sell this car if it's not Kawak? And that was what was happening, right? Like before Kawak, to sell your car, it would have taken 6 months, you're going to get defrauded. Now it can take 6 hours. It sucks waiting 6 hours, but it's better than 6 months.
Yeah, way better.
But that's an issue because your customer is going to evaluate you at those 6 hours. So you need to get better at that. But our focus was building sort of like those verticals. As we build out those verticals, we lost a little bit. Imagine it's like building a business, building a building in the middle of, I don't know, Mayfair in London. And the architecture is amazing. The building is amazing. Everything is amazing because you build sort of like the right foundational. And everybody wants to go into that building. And the moment that they go in and they buy an apartment, there's no interior decor. There's not a great vibe. That happened when you're going through complexity and you're building all these verticals. We lost sight a little bit about that interior decor, how our customers were feeling when they were actually going through the process because we were building that building. And what still customers were satisfied because when they left the building, they said, well, I'm in Mayfair. This is amazing. Yeah. But 80% of their time, they're in their apartment, right? And that second phase, for us to become a global company, we're focused on building that building. The third phase is where we are right now. We're back to interior decor. We're back to making that experience jaw-dropping, to making sure that our customers really understand what's going on. And when you go through those things, you're going to get criticized. And when you're becoming, in Mexico, it wasn't something that happened slowly. We became the biggest very fast. We created enemies around the incumbents. 50% of that press was paid. We're getting so much noise, so much unicorn. You're a billionaire, all of this, and we're like, what is a unicorn? What are people? Like, I was literally sleeping in a mattress in my bed when this is happening, talking to my wife that's up here, and all of this mess is happening. For us, going inside of it as a CEO, as a founder, and as a team member of Kawak, that noise is what people are talking about. We need to wake up every day, and do the work. You need to make sure that you improve that customer experience. So for us, it feels very differently.
Okay, and talking about waking up, this is going to be my last question, so you guys get the chance to ask as many questions as you, well, not as many, but a few questions. I really want to share this, and I want you to talk about it, because in the conversation we were having previously, I was so pumped up by the fact that you told us that you wake up every day trying to hit a home run, because if you hit one, that's a game changer for your life, and so there's no real reason on why not to wake up every day trying to hit that home run. Can you tell us, share to the audience, that mentality that you have, and you've always had, because I think that's super valuable and super interesting.
You have to think, everybody in this room has a choice, today and tomorrow. You can wake up and you can be on the defensive, or you can wake up and be on the offensive. That's the choice that you have. When you choose to be on the defensive, you end up sort of like picking a day or a decision where you're in a range of success, where, I get a great job, I can make some money, I can fulfill for my family, I can fulfill my ambition, my accomplishments can be there, but they're always going to be in a range. I can, get a great job, get a not so great job, I can make a lot of money, I can make a little bit of less money, I can be accomplished and fulfilled by the purpose that I'm doing, but you're always going to be in a range. And when you're in the defensive, you're always thinking about what you can lose. Well, I don't want to lose my house, I don't want to lose my car, I don't want to lose my watch or whatever. Your limitations are guided by what you can lose, not by what you can win or what you can sort of get. 99.9% of people wake up every day and they pick the defensive. It's the easiest thing. And the defensive looks sexy, right? It's McKinsey, right? It looks sexy, right? You're in the NBA, $200,000, I don't know how much they pay these days, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm coming from eating Domino's and kebabs, I want that. And the problem with the defensive is that people that are leading the charge in the defensive, they're protecting their back. These are people that are very senior, very experienced, very smart, but they have a wife or a husband or a family member that is always telling them, we cannot lose what we have. We need to maintain the status that we built. And those same people, these are very senior people, very smart people. Those same people are the ones making the decisions for your life. You know, you're being led by a bunch of people that they don't want to risk it. So you're going to be in that range of risk. And for me, that's terrifying. It's always been terrifying to go into that. And I've lived in that range, and I've been led by people in that range. And I admire a lot of people, like most of my people that I know live there. And I admire them and I love them. But then you have another option. Like, go for the offensive. And what's the offensive? This is the way I see it. You wake up every day trying to hit a home run. Like, every day of your life, if you do it well that day, that can be a life. Like, the rewards of a home run in business world is not like in baseball. In baseball, you're going to, like, score four runs. In business, like, if you hit it, it's generational. It's something that's going to change your life forever. Like, it's uncapped reward. And the downside is you don't hit it today. But if you wake up every day with that mindset, you might hit it someday. And even if you don't, you're unfortunately not going to be in a position to have a lot of stuff. So you don't have that fear of losing stuff. So for me, it's always been about, what can I do today that can really, you know, it's a couple of things that you're looking for. One is, you know, accomplish something that I envision, and that reward of that is crazy when something doesn't exist and then it exists because you did the work. That reward, like having that feeling every time I get to that place, is amazing. Obviously, the financial reward plays into it. It's not the most important thing. I wish everybody would have every money that you want to have, so like you can realize very quickly that that's not what it is all about. But then I think the most important thing is the unleashing reward, right? Like when you get to unleash people around you in that mindset. And when you work in that environment, it's crazy, right? And you can do that without being an entrepreneur. You can go and see, you know, this. When I was in Oxford, this was 2010, right? So Facebook's ripping. You know, we remember those days, right? Like LinkedIn is ripping. Like if I would have known better, I would have probably gone and followed one of these crazy people in their journey, because what you get when you're in that home run sort of like environment is it's just a bunch of people that they just don't have the same limitations that everybody else has. So because they don't have those limitations, you can think bigger, you can take on more risk, you can fail and it's rewarded. Like failing is a part of it. Like a bunch of people always ask me, Carlos, but how can you live that like every day? You're taking on so much risk. I'm like, no, like risk is the biggest scam your teachers, your parents, your family has ever told you there exists. You guys are being trained here today to decide why not to do things. Everything that you discuss, like have a conversation in the next 48 hours and you're gonna see that everybody's talking about why not to do things. Nobody's talking about why to do things. And the reality about risk is that risk is a lie. When people tell me, my investors, my team, my family, they tell me, Carlos, but if you do this, this can go wrong. You take this decision, and this can happen. And this is doomsday. They're right, theoretically, but practically they're very wrong, because what they're missing is that I'm going to show up every 24 hours to guide that decision that I made. So if I make a decision today, and I show up in 24 hours to see how that went, I'm either going to push it forward because it went good or reassess because it went bad. And then I'll make another decision. And then I'm going to wake up and I'm going to show up the next 24 hours. So risk is only there for people that don't have the discipline to show up every 24 hours. And that's how I live life. You know, I go out and I have a big vision of what I want to build. Most people don't even know what that vision is, because when I say it out loud, they think I'm completely distorted from reality, and they are right. But the reality is, the next thing that I do is think, what can I do in the next 24 hours to get closer to that? And then that's where realism happens. And I make a decision that is a small one. And then I show up the next 24 hours, and that makes the ride easier, right? That makes, there's no bad day. There's just days where you have to deal with stuff, days where you have to deal with great stuff, days where you have to deal with bad stuff. But you're there to deal with them. Most people check out. Even in business, they make a decision and then they see, let's get together in 3 months to see how it went. Wrong. Like I make a decision and I ask, tell me in 24 hours, how did that go? You bring the cadence. People think it's micromanaging. That's not micromanaging. That's actually building. You know, like, oh, go, like, we want to do this and tell me in 3 months how it's going. No. We want to do this. Tell me how it went in 24 hours. You bring the cadence down. You bring the margin of error down. You see the margin of success sooner. So you're able to make a decision to sort of like do that. So it's a mindset of trying to hit that home run, but also making sure that you show up. And every time I'm wrong about something, I'm always coming back to my board or my team and they say, Carlos, but hey, but you were wrong about this. Yeah, but I'm showing up. I'm here. Let's make it right. And I think that's how you get that mentality going.
Yeah, it's all about pursuing a North Star and adjusting the North Star and like kind of being able to be flexible. So let's go to Q&A. We're going to get 2 or 3 questions at a time so we can be more efficient with the microphone. So I saw one hand up there, one hand here, and another one here. So let's do those 3, please.
Thank you, Carlos. First of all, thank you for being here. I've reached out to you kind of like 4 years ago to invite you to come. So kudos to Benjamin, because I don't know how he did it, but he managed to get you here. So thank you for that. But also, I wanted to ask you, as being part of the MBA, if anything, has that helped you? Did it help you with creating a persona and then put that in front of investors and so on, and to build your business case? I mean, obviously you had expertise from Amazon and then you went into consulting, but I just wanted to know if that kind of like helped you or propel your career in some way.
The short answer is yes. The real answer is not probably the way that you think it did. So what's the beautiful thing about being in this program and being in Oxford particularly? Like, this is a magical place, guys. Like, you know, you're in, I think, one of the only places in the world where everybody here is excited for what their life is going to be next. Like, everybody has time. Everybody right now has in their stomach sort of like that feeling of what's going to happen next. Everybody has the openness to talk to people. You're just very lucky to be able to stop and just be in a place where everybody sort of like has that energy. And I think the MBA did that for me. You know, before I came to the MBA at Oxford, I was literally, you know, living on €2 in Italy, hitting rock bottom. Like when I came, like I'm not gonna go into the story because it's long, but it was just terrible. And when I came here, I learned a couple of things. One, your life can change in an instant. And it did for me, you know. In an instant, I was with a group of peers that were all very successful, very accomplished. Everybody's so ambitious. And I saw that, you know, if you change your surroundings and you put yourself in the right place, that's powerful, right? You know, and that happened to me, that understanding of putting myself in the right place. When you're building life or business, it's not about how good you surf the wave. It's about how big the wave you get. Like, you're going to be more successful because of the wave that you get in, but than your skills as a surfer, you know. So you just need to get in the right wave. So the first thing that I learned was how to make how to position myself in the right place, because that's what's going to change my life. In the case of the MBA, was only Oxford did that to me. Then, you know, you're probably going to be more successful if you join Facebook as the first 50 employees than if you try to go on your own and build something. You know, you have to be very thoughtful around picking that wave. It's more important than how to surf in that wave. Your individual contribution, it's not going to be enough. We're limited as individual contributors. So the MBA gave me that. I didn't know that lesson then, but I knew I had sort of like that first grasp of it. And then it gave me a second lesson that I didn't know then, that I know now. I had time, so I could get bored. And you only create out of boredom. Like when you're a kid, you're always doing stuff, right? Phones nowadays make it difficult for us to get bored. That's why I never use my phone. But I had time, so I could be creative. And I wasn't creative when it came to my job or when it came to but I was creative on how I got into McKinsey. I got rejected by every single McKinsey's. You know, they're the same, just different names, you know. They're all great, and to my This is being recorded, right? But because I had time, I was here. Somebody came to give a lecture around this tool that you can get a job through this tool and network. And this person was Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn. And I was in a class and I was like, well, this tool seems amazing. I left class that day and I didn't come back to class for like a month. And I literally wrote to 120 consultants through LinkedIn saying, hey, how's your life? Tell me a little bit about your job. The open rate there was like 90%. Everybody responded because it was a new tool. It was like when email came out in 97, you sent that email, it was like magic and people responded. No spam. I also lived that moment, it was crazy. So I just hacked my way through, like literally recruiters from BCG, Bain, all these companies. Carlos, I got your resume 40 times. I'm like, how? I'm like, well, invite me. And when they invited me to an interview, I used this group of peers. Before I went to the first interview, I got an interview like by 100 people that have gone through consultancy before through Oxford. And by that time I went to the room to get interviewed, I was sitting there with a Stanford person, with a Harvard person that they all, first year, they were invited to be there. I bullied my way into that room. I killed it. Like I knew more about the company, I knew more about how to get interviewed than anybody else. And that taught me, to be in there, and so, and also being bored helped me build relationships here. One of the best relationships that I created is my friends that I built when I was at Oxford, and the social aspect of it, just being bored doing stuff, partying, like doing all these things, remind you that you have a lot of control of like what your life feels like. And I had lost that before the MBA. For a while, I've lost that feeling, and Oxford gave that feeling back to me. This place is magical. There's none like it in the world. There's no other MBA in the world that is set in a town like Oxford. So I got that. I didn't know the lessons then. So like I started to discover them through time, and now I go back into the past and like take these lessons, and that's what I got. That's what I got from it. And yeah, we did some business cases here or there, but it wasn't that got me.
Okay, so let's do the final two questions. Please go together and let's try to keep them short, please.
Sure. It's my fault. I'm sorry I talked too much.
No, we love it. Like I think no one wants to finish this, but
thanks so much, Carlos. In regards to the fact you started in Mexico, there were different challenges as you did describe clearly. Do you think that was a very fundamental factor to, let's say, bulletproof your business for growing exponentially around the world? Or what other things, like the general process you follow to validate ideas? You mentioned before that you use a lot of data, AI. What is different from Kavak compared to other competitors now that you're facing globally that lets you stand out to grow your business globally?
Now let's listen to the second question.
Thank you very much. I'm Professor Chris Imafidon. I really enjoyed your chronology in terms of stories going to the prison. If you were going to advise your teenage self, what key advice will you give them? Should they read biographies of successful entrepreneurs? Should they be more adventurous? What will you tell your teenage 19-year-old or 18-year-old? Thank you.
Good question. So I'm going to answer really quickly your question, then go into this one. Mexico, the reason why I started in Mexico was very, very simple. It was very numbers oriented. Mexico is the biggest city in North America. You have like 25 million people living there. The issue there was huge. Fraud in Mexico was probably huger there than any other place in Latin America. And financing penetration, you only had 5% of people that were getting loans versus 90% in the other places of the world. And I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't capped by the size of the market. And because I expanded so quickly on my other business, I needed to make sure that I can just be in one place without I know myself, I get ambitious early, and then I make mistakes because of that. I wanted to make sure that I was in a place where I could just test it out really well. And Mexico City made a lot of sense, because if I just won the city, it was going to be big enough for me to solve for very decades. So I did do a thorough analysis on where to start. And I was agnostic because I come from Venezuela. I have no home, and I went to 14 different schools. I've moved 30 times. For me, it was just about where the opportunities, where is that wave the biggest? So I'll position myself in the right wave, right? And that's why I started in Mexico. The second question, against my competitors, I don't see I don't view competition like I think it's a waste of time. I just listen to my customer and I listen to the vision that I have in mind and what future I want to build, and then I iterate versus to what my customer is saying and build towards that. Competitors come in, come out. I don't like to guide me or my team against the thoughts of somebody else that's probably not listening to the customer with the same discipline that I am. So I'm not here to build a company. I'm here to solve a problem, and that's what maybe a competitor is trying to build a company. Your question, 90-year-old self, it depends. So I think one thing that is really relevant is where we are right now in time. We are living the biggest technological shift that the world has ever seen right now in this moment. So what's happening right now, so you guys can grasp it, you have a Nokia phone in your pockets. You guys are probably too young to have had a Nokia phone. And all of a sudden, there's an iPhone 16 there. And most people are telling, hey, why don't you use that iPhone 16 and tell me how it works? That's what's happening with AI. And everybody is like delegating the iPhone 16 that's sitting there, and you're still using your Nokia. There's no way that you learn the power of an iPhone by delegating it. You have to get it and use it yourself. And I think I'm understating. I think that's not an iPhone, it's something even 100 times bigger, what you're missing out. So today, if you're 19 years old, if you're young, or now it doesn't matter the age, you're 80. The first thing that you need to understand that there's an iPhone 16 out there and I have a Nokia, and that's AI. And that most people are using AI, ChatGPT, like Google. 20-year-olds are using it like their operating system. So the first thing is, forget about everything that you've learned so far. Forget about everything that you know. You have to drop out of your mind all the knowledge that you have. Don't throw it away. Just put it out there for a little while and see that there's this new tool that can make you fly. When you get into that knowledge of how AI works, what you can do with it, how you make it an operating system, and you bring all of that experience back, like you're gonna be able to think about problem solutions, your life in a very different way. So to a 19-year-old, I would say, this is a time like you're gonna be able, like if you get into this technology, you're gonna be able to probably accelerate your path to understanding what the world's gonna look like and what you can do in this world and how you can hack it by the time you're 22. I couldn't say that to myself when I was 19 because the technology wasn't there when I was 19 to make that strive. I couldn't even say that to myself when I was in Oxford because the technology was not there to make that strive. But now, 20-year-olds can build the next phase of the future, right? And because they don't have so much experience, they have no bias. And not having a bias is a skill set when you're going through such a deep transformational technological shift because you don't think things are impossible. So I would get that person and I would make sure that for the next 30 days, they learn how to use AI. And you can learn how to use AI in 30 days, by the way, and use it really well. You know, I have LLMs to do everything for me, everything. You know, I don't even have now teams around me because it's like I can work with a 40-year-old that has a lot of information, or I can work with a machine that has all the information, right? That can give me advice, that can give me insight, and I can build that. You can reshift everything. So I would encourage that, and obviously I would encourage that mindset that we talked a little bit earlier. Is the world is there's so many rules that guide us, right? From our parents to our schools, and people think that we live in a world that you have to like obey these rules. The reality is that there's no real rules. Everything is false. Once you understand that you can hack it, and that you can think differently, and that you need to take on risk to achieve what you ever want, and that you can never ever allow anybody to tell you no, and you understand to disobey those rules as early as possible, the better. But in the same time, you need to be able to acknowledge the people around you, the experience around you, and use that in your favor, and understand that nobody's against you, everybody's in favor of themselves. And that's something that I wish I knew when I was 20, I wish I knew when I was 2 years ago, that nobody was against me, that everybody was in favor of themselves. When you understand that simple fact, you don't take anything personal anymore. And you just start to think about, what does the other person want? What do I want? What's the common ground? How can I communicate that common ground to that person? If I'm able to communicate that common ground to that person is going to feel an excitement that they haven't felt in a while because nobody's listening to them anyways. And then how can I get that person in the next 24 hours to move forward, because nobody moves forward. And when you crack that in that mindset and you combine it with AI, you combine it with that risk mentality, that against risk mentality, combined with understanding that the world is not against you, it creates a lot of impact.
Thank you so much, Carlos. It's been quite an honor to have you here at the Nelson Mandela Lecture Theatre, back in Oxford for a second time since you graduated. It's been, cannot thank you enough for being here. We, as Latin Americans, as building this, we've come to realize that representation and showing up matters. And having you as a Venezuelan that built a unicorn in Mexico and expanded all throughout Latin America and Middle East, I think you're the prime example of of showing up and we feeling represented by someone like you. It's just great. We would love you to have you more involved, if possible. But no, I just want to thank you for being here, coming here. It's been great. Thank you. Muchísimas gracias.